Welcome to our webinar this morning, talking about a letter that we received from Detective Ray Lamy from the Manchester Police Department, and something that was shared with all of our members through our daily CU scan. I'm Walt Laskos. I'm the communications person down at the League, and I'm pleased to join with some of our colleagues today from Manchester. We have
Shirley Budo
from St. Mary's Bank Credit Union. And we also have Jeanette
Mullen from HRCU in Rochester.
And Leah
Taylor from HRCU as well.
So to get everything kicked off, what we're going to do first is we're going to start. I want to share it with you, a video interview that we have with Detective Lamy. He provides a little bit more information in the interview than he did in the letter. And then after we watch that video, we'll come back and we'll discuss what he had to say. So if you bear with me, we'll move over and show the video.
So Ray, thank you so much for coming over today to the Credit Union Museum and spending a couple minutes with us, filling us in about the communication that you recently shared with the credit unions. Let's begin by first, tell me a little bit about the work that you do and your unit with the Manchester Police Department.
Sure, Walter, thank you for having us. Obviously, this is a work in progress and we have to work together. So my name is Ray Lamy. I'm a detective in Manchester Police. I specifically am assigned to financial and fraud crime. As a department, we all work together on all major crimes, but when it comes to financial and fraud, we kind of specialize that into individuals. There are other detectives that will also work on the cases and we'll share information back and forth together.
I would take it that when you look at the amount of fraud and scams going on today, that you and your colleagues in the unit are probably quite busy.
We're very busy. I'm technically the only one specifically assigned to that unit, but again, there's the amount of cases that we have, we do spread them around the department.
Okay, so you sent a communication to the credit unions of New Hampshire calling attention to some increase in fraudulent activity that you observed. And focused on two areas. One of those areas was check cashing. Give us a little background on what you observed.
There's a couple of different avenues that they're taking. You'll have organized crime that's coming out of different areas outside of New England. They'll come in with stolen checks, fake IDs. They'll typically try to go through a drive-through as far away from the teller as possible to show the ID, which will look fairly legitimate, but I think if it's run through appropriate scans, it'll come back as fake. And they'll try to cash checks immediately, and they'll go from institution to institution in a very short period of time, trying to cash as many as possible, because they realize that at some point that somebody's going to catch on to it and they'll shut it down.
Mm-hmm. And I take it too that one of the things that we're looking at here is that credit unions might tend to provide more of that cash, make it more accessible sooner than other institutions perhaps, and sometimes that could get caught for the credit union, put them in a jam in terms of the fraud?
Well, I think that they realize that, both the bigger organized and also smaller individuals that are just taking it by chance. They realize that if they go in and can cash the check and get cash immediately, it's less risk for them than if they're going to go and have to open an account, deposit the check, wait 2 or 3 days. They may not try to get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Now I know you mentioned that this was prevalent in the Manchester area. Is it just the Manchester area, or do you see this really kind of across the state?
I think it's across the state. I talked to some of my counterparts in other big cities, and we all see it. It's just a matter of Manchester obviously has a larger population, so we see more of it.
All right, so when it comes down to then the check cashing and some of the fraud that you see, any suggestions that credit unions should consider?
Well, obviously it becomes a business decision for them, but if they look at what more of the banks are doing as far as their funds availability policy, you won't see checks being cashed if it's not drawn on their institution the same day. They're going to wait at least 1 business day for a small portion, and then the second business day to give more of the money out. They're not seeing as many of the losses, and I'm also not receiving as many reports from those institutions. So, it can help everybody, but like I said, it's a business decision that the executives need to make to show that, hey, we can slow this down.
The other aspect that you call attention to are loans. Tell us a little bit about your findings there.
Well, we found a few, again, these are more organized, but people will come into the city, 4 or 5 individuals at a time, and they'll just start running around to all the institutions trying to apply for personal loans. They typically have out-of-state driver's licenses, and they'll make up a story that they're here for work or they just moved here and haven't got a new license. But they'll also provide fake documentation. So they'll go online and print out fake pay stubs, fake W-2s, which for the most part look okay, but if you really scrutinize it, you can pick it apart. They may have the invalid EIN number where it may not be the proper format. The numbers may not add up where it's all even numbers by the end of the year. But the other big thing that they can do to prevent this from happening is make a phone call. So do a verbal verification of employment, and every time you're going to find out that if they do work there, okay, it's a legitimate loan, but the people aren't going to extremes because they're giving real companies in the area for pay stubs, and if you call that company, you can verify they don't work there.
Any other closing remarks that you have for the credit unions that will be participating in today's webcast for working with your department or in their behavior to try to mitigate fraud and scams?
Well, I think if they want to reach out to me, they certainly can call me at the station, email me, ask for any advice or assistance. If they have scenarios that they want to run by to say, if we try this, might this work? You know, a lot of it might come down to computer programming. Maybe if they can identify ways to alert a teller that, hey, this person has just withdrawn 5 different transactions in the last 2 hours in the city. Maybe that's something that they could alert them to say, take a look at this because I understand that they're busy at the counter and they may not be able to scan through different screens, but if something can pop up automatically, that may help too.
Wonderful. Ray, thank you so much for
All
being
right,
with
thank
us.
you.
Okay, we just heard the Detective Ray Lamy sharing his findings and his thoughts about the scams that he sees taking place throughout the state. Let's start our little conversation and tell me, what do you think? Any reactions? Who wants to get it going?
Well, I'll jump in. One of the things is it's not necessarily fake IDs and funds that we're not putting on hold that seems to be the problem, because we all have to live by the same federal regulations as to how long we can hold funds. What we're seeing from our experiences anyway, for some of the larger fraud, is that it's our own members' identification that's been stolen. So somebody's coming in pretending to be Shirley Budo and is wearing a wig or whatever to look like Shirley Budo, definitely going through drive up, and they're presenting some other stolen checks to cash, and they're cashing against available funds. So in that case, we think it's our member, we're cashing. So sometimes the putting delays on checks that are being deposited isn't the problem, because again, we all have to live by the same rules. One of the things that we've been really strengthening is the frontline training, making sure that our staff, is comfortable asking questions of, what is this check for? Why did you get it? Especially when it's counterfeits, as well as sharing our experiences. So when we're seeing these counterfeits or when we're seeing checks being presented that are coming back bad, we're now forwarding that as a monthly newsletter to all of our branch staff so that they can see what they look like. And we say, hey, this check was from out of state, or this was an ID that was presented from out of state, just so they can question a little more and identify red flags quicker.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Shirley. We met with our fraud department and asked, what are we seeing in the Rochester, Dover area? And a lot of it is just targeted directly to the members. And again, it's knowing your member. Know who they are, know that you're doing all of the verification process before you give any cash out. And you're absolutely right. You have to ask the questions, and when we go through our onboarding with new employees, the frontline employees, we fill them in we provide all of the training we possibly can as it pertains to the different types of frauds that we're seeing. And it's constant communication. just letting the front line know what to look for, what to ask for, and know that you're asking questions not because you're being nosy, you're asking these questions because you care. And that's one of the benefits of a credit union, is that you are protecting your members. So it's up to us on the management team to make sure we're providing all of the education we possibly can, all of the training, all of the communications, so that that can be transmitted down to our members, and knowing that they're feeling protected by what we're doing.
Leah?
I say education is key, really, when it comes out, and sharing the experiences too is very important. I feel like we do that very well at our credit union. Anytime something comes up, we all hear about it. We know what's going on. Even from the member perspective too, educating the members a little bit more too. We've been putting out some things on that as well through social media, and then just talking to them if we suspect something. Like we tell the front line, when in doubt, just ask questions. If you don't feel comfortable, get your supervisor. Always kind of go with that gut feeling, because you know who they are. If something just seems different to you, you should really approach it in a way that, obviously you're going to be respectful, but at the same time making sure that you're protecting that member in case something is really going on.
I think one of the main reasons why we're gathered here today too is, and we chatted about this, we share it with those that are listening over the telephone or through the internet, is that, the detective sends out the letter, he calls attention to this, and I think we've all seen it where scams and fraud just seem to be escalating and getting more and more out of control, and it seems like no one is safe anymore. They're going after everyone. I know we're doing a lot of stuff with the elderly and with senior safeguard and trying to create awareness among seniors about all the different scams taking place that are targeting them. But now you start seeing that the military is targeted, banks, credit unions are targeted. It's no one's safe anymore. We all have to be on guard with it. So I think the idea today is for us to, again, raise awareness among all of our colleagues throughout the state about what the detective had to say and about what we're facing. And you just have, I think it really calls for us to ramp up our defenses so that we're constantly on guard. Now, that being said, let me play devil's advocate and throw this out here. Now, obviously, any kind of policies are all created and governed by the local credit union. They set policies. But do you fear that within a credit union, since we are so different than the banks, where we give so much attention and commitment and devotion to members, that it could be easier for a scammer to come in and commit fraud against the credit union because we might be so willing to help someone who's a member or a potential member from doing their banking with us?
Partly, yes, but at the same time, we still have to pay attention to the red flags. I know he had mentioned the loan fraud, the personal unsecured loan fraud. We went through that and we were misguided in thinking, oh, well, this all happens on the internet. Well, now we were having people coming in person with our branches saying, oh, I just moved here from Georgia. Here's my Georgia license. Well, it was all stolen identities. So again, it's a learning experience, unfortunately, and we have changed our processes as to how we go about with especially unsecured loans. But it's questioning those red flags and not just taking everything at face value. The fact that you've got somebody that just moved here and is maybe living, their address is not exactly the best area in the world, but yet, is making $8,000 a month and, has an out-of-state license and wants to get an unsecured loan to put in a jacuzzi in a place that they rent. All those things are red flags to get comfortable to say, this doesn't quite sound right. And again, it's educating the staff to say, yes, you want to be open and comforting to our members, but at the same time, you can't just throw everything out the window. You've got to question those red flags and feel comfortable having that back and forth discussion that when they say this, we'll then ask this. And when they say this, we'll ask this.
Yeah, and that gut feeling.
Absolutely.
You follow that gut feeling, and as Leah said, never make that decision on your own. Always consult with somebody else. If you're not feeling comfortable with what you're faced with in your office, go seek assistance and get another opinion.
And I think our credit union really focuses on that too. You know, we have pretty good policies in place. Our person we've done like a complete 180 in this area. We haven't seen a lot of what the detective talked about in our area, but we are getting it in different avenues, definitely. And that's where they've stepped in and made policies and procedures to really train the staff on questions to ask. And, you know, do we give a call back, make sure to verify it's them, et cetera, on that. So.
See, and I think that's comforting to know that at least within our different shops, we have a lot of systems in place and processes in place, training, so that we can be extra vigilant, particularly if we're going to cater or attend to the needs of our members the way we do, well, then we have to be extra careful about, following compliance issues and things of that sort, so that we keep everything safe, because that's what we're about too, right? Now, I remember, I think I did share with you all earlier, I came across an article today, I'm not sure if it was in the New York Times or the Washington Post, but they're stating that down in the Atlanta, Georgia area, there's a big fraud scheme that's going on with banks and credit unions, and basically it's with auto loans, that they've set up some of these fake ID accounts so that credit unions are being scammed, banks are being scammed for making these auto loans that are to a fake dealership kind of thing. So it's we're not, maybe in some ways we are kind of protected up here in the Northeast, where we don't have some of the issues that that, let's say, our colleagues and credit unions are facing throughout the country. But I think the major focus here is to constantly be on guard and constantly be on guard for our members, and so that they don't get scammed. You all are doing a lot of stuff to make sure that your membership is staying safe.
Yeah, and I think too, the fraudsters are getting bolder, because again, it used to be that, oh, well, it's all happening online. And so you would question more of things that came through that channel. And then we got, okay, well, no, they're actually coming into branch with the fake IDs and doing it that way. Well, now we've recently seen, we believe it's a larger identity theft with a high-end vehicle at a dealership with what we believe is fake ID. So they're going in, thinking, okay, well, as long as I can pass the credit because I've stolen ID for someone with great credit, I can walk out today with a car. Before it was just, let me get the cash right away. Now it's, okay, well, let's get the vehicle and sell the vehicle. So they're getting more bold. And so we're having, again, we caught that more saying, wait a minute, you just moved here, you've got this ID, there was a fraud alert on the person's credit. There were all these red flags that we questioned, and the person ended up walking out of the deal and walking away and not responding to anybody. We're like, okay, phew, saved that one.
Yeah, they're definitely very, very creative in the avenues that they use for fraud. I mean, we heard some pretty creative stories ourselves at our credit union, but just the technology that they're able to use to make it look like our members, or even to the members, make it look like it's us calling them as well. That seems like being a new trend right now out there. It blows my mind how they come up with all these different ways over and over again. And I think they would at some point not be able to come up with something new, but they continue to do it.
So you see it getting worse?
I think with the technology out there and they call it the dark web, being able to get people's information, I do see like the technology side getting worse on that, just because like I said, they're creating something new every time, and once one thing doesn't work, they move on to another way to do it.
If you were to look at your shops, and maybe not that we're sharing secrets, but we are all cooperators, within the movement. If you were to say maybe a key factor or something that you're doing at your credit union that you believe is like one of the major safeguards to really, keep that vault safe and keep the members safe, and keep the fraudsters and the scammers from being successful. Like, what might that be, if you're willing to share it?
I think, it isn't as much as we rely on the people side of it, and whether it's the people side for training our staff or training our members or educating our members. We are at the point you have to use technology, and you've got to have more fraud monitoring in place. And unfortunately, you know, the smaller shops may not have the funds because the stuff gets expensive. But I know we've implemented a solution at the front end so that all checks that are scanned through, they're run against a huge database of counterfeits, closed account checks, NSF checks, and it will flag right to the teller right then and there so that they know whether they should place the hold right away. And then on the back end of having the fraud monitoring, that we have somebody that comes in at 7 a.m. so that before 8, before the branch is open, everything that is unusual and kicked out of a member's account to say, well, wait a minute, this person hasn't negotiated this type of transaction or always does an ACH deposit, but now today they did a paper deposit or a remote deposit. Those are triggering out, and we've just got to have more staff and more technology. Unfortunately, it's going that route that you just can't do it manually anymore.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're beginning to notice that there's a lot of fraudulent checks that are coming through, the mobile deposit and, the ATMs or the ITMs. And, it is a little bit more difficult to detect, but, it is going back to the member's behavior. And if it's out of the norm, you do question it, and there are red flags. I know at Holy Rosary Credit Union, we do a lot of verifications, and it's like a dual control type of verification. Leah had alluded to the spoofing, the phone spoofing that's happening. So educating the members that if they get a call and it looks like it's from HRCU, no, don't answer it. Call us. Call the number that you're familiar with. And then what we'll do is we'll address the issues with the member, and then we'll say, we're going to call you back. And that's where the dual control comes in, is that we have somebody else call and we go through a series of questions that only that member would be able to answer. So that the member will feel comfortable in knowing that it is actually HRCU that's calling them, and wanting to help them, or if we detect that there's fraud on their account, that we're wanting to work through that problem with them.
So, a lot of it too is not just, I guess if we look at the detective, he's basically, his focus is more on the operations at the credit union and in terms of staff and what they are doing in order to prevent scams or fraud from taking place. But in many respects, so much is happening where these scams and frauds are going after our members. And that opens the door to a whole other side. Now, as you know, we were all on the radio here at WGIR a couple of weeks ago, talking about within the community, all the different scams and frauds that are taking place. We are going out to senior centers. I know we're talking to a lot of, we're going to be planning to do something with the co-op housing and the seniors that are part of that. And also just in educational forums that we put on, right? And that's going to be an ongoing thing. It seems like, when you see how this industry that's making like over $40 billion a year off of folks, I don't see there's going to be an end in sight. I'm almost at the point now, from all the work that I'm doing in 4 states, of thinking that every credit union should just have someone that's like a senior advocate or some type of an advocate on behalf of educating members about the scams, the frauds, and because you have to tell them and tell them again and tell them again that there's no end in sight. So maybe if you want to, could you share a little bit about maybe some of the outreach that you might be doing at your credit unions in terms of educating members, what it might be? Is it just in the newsletters? Are you doing any kind of sessions or things of that sort? What might you be?
Yeah, I'd be happy to respond to that. We are going out and we're doing a lot of education. We're targeting specific groups with going out on the road with our educational component. And right now we've started with the Senior Safeguard program. So we're going out and we're educating the caretakers on what to look for when they're taking care of somebody who's elderly, and the scams that they could potentially be targeted with. Then what we're also doing is we've had a Fraud Friday where we have a lot of information that we just provide and have available to the members on the different frauds that are happening out there. And we're looking to increase our Fraud Fridays and have them out there more often.
Gina, was that your idea? That's a cool one, Fraud Friday. I like that.
No, it's actually Christie's
Oh,
from the
there we go.
credit union. It was her idea, and it was very, very well received. And we're recognizing the need to have that more frequently. The other thing is that we're trying to educate people on social media and letting them know about the different scams that are going on. And it actually just within the past week or so, in reading several different articles and newspaper articles, things that are happening right in our area right now, I just feel like we need to really increase our education on Facebook and on social media on what to do.
So yeah, we actually do it in our high school branch. We actually do a whole section on scams and schemes. So because I feel like those are the people that are going to be moving in, and if we don't educate them, they're going to be quickly caught up in, you know, this younger generation is doing everything digitally. What are some of the things they need to watch out for? What do they need to protect? Because I don't think we educate at that level enough to protect your social security number. Don't give stuff out on the phone, but they do everything on their phone.
Right.
So really educating, I think, the younger generations too, so they aren't coming into these problems when they're older and like, oh yeah, that's a red flag. I should watch out for that. So we do cut it down there a little bit in the younger age as well, on top of all the stuff.
That's a good trend too, because with all the work that New Hampshire credit unions do with Scene for Reality fairs and that sort, so that plays nicely into supporting that and bringing that in there. That's a very good point.
And you're seeing a lot more students falling for the scams, you know, for whether it's an online job or, you know, friends that they've met online, what have you. But it is difficult to try to get the information out to a large number of people in a way that they'll actually respond. Because, you know, hosting events, you're only going to get certain people. Social media is great, but at the same time, it's which social media are they using today? Which one's the big one today? I know we've talked about doing, you know, let's just do some kooky little videos, like funny, you know, YouTube videos, something that will grab the attention, because that's what you need is grab the attention and do, you know, a little minute and a half or 30-second. So we're always brainstorming of how do we reach the most people with the information in the short little bites, enough for them to say, maybe I should ask somebody about that.
Yeah, it's constantly.
When we were talking with our fraud protection department, one of the things that she saw recently that's happening is the car wrap scam.
Yeah.
So that is where somebody will contact somebody and will say, we'll pay you $1,000 if you'll wrap your car with Mountain Dew advertisement. And people will do that, and then they end up, and then they'll say, oh, but you're going to have to send us some money back. And so they'll send them a fraudulent check, and then they send the money back, and then that scam happens all over again. Now, what's happening is today is that kids are starting to go back to college. And if they have a car, they're going to look for ways to make extra money. And so be diligent. You know, kids out there, don't get involved in something like this.
But they want the attention too, because they think it's cool, like, hey, I can put this all over social media and you know, my friends will like me and I'll get all the follows and like that. But at the end of it, it's, you know, they know how, these fraudsters know how to play on these different age groups.
They do this for a while.
Very well. Yes, they know their demographic. For sure.
Yeah. Well, we said that over and over because, you know, when you look at the kind of money they're making, they have enough resources to get the best in software, best whatever intelligence, intel to do what they're doing, and they're getting away with it. You know, and everything again that I'm finding out from all the different committees I'm on is education and awareness are the best tools to combat this right now, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, we had looking at last month's statistics, we had 19 counterfeits that got deposited or attempted to be deposited at our at St. Mary's Bank, and 16 of them we identified, whether we identified front office or whether we identified with monitoring. So again, it goes back to as much as we try to educate the members, we really need to educate the staff. You know, you're getting a check that says, oh, it's from Georgia, it's from California, this person lives in New Hampshire, and that this is not their employer. We're asking, well, is it your employer, but is it the employer that you found online? Have you physically met your employer? Have they asked you to send any money back? So yeah, it's just having all of those, it's layered controls, just like, we say about cybersecurity, it's layers upon layers.
That's right.
It's the same thing with protecting against these
That's
frauds.
right, and it's a very good point that you're making, Shirley, because you really, when you think about it, like with cybersecurity, you could go through training, and a month from now, you kind of get lax again and forget some of the things they're doing. So it's constantly being, right there, at the top of your game to basically keep the credit union safe, keep the members safe, keep the money safe. It's an ongoing battle. And we're coming up at about a half-hour mark into our webcast. Let me do this. Let me ask each of you if you have any closing remarks, anything you'd like to share before we wrap up that could be of value to the other credit unions that are watching this, or something that that they really need to take to heart, so that they too can make sure that they're staying in compliance and keeping everything at their credit union safe.
I think, incorporating anything and everything that you can learn in protecting the members in your weekly huddles or daily huddles or whatever, and just always keeping it top of mind that scams are happening. They're happening all the time, and there's a new one that's going to pop up every day. So it's just being vigilant and knowing that, we work for a credit union where, we want to educate, we want to protect, we want to be vigilant in the way in which we deal with our members. So just, incorporating whatever educational component you can possibly do in dealing with your frontline staff.
Yeah, I definitely think that would be my key point too. And I kind of like Base said, to do a newsletter out. It would be a great idea that, they might do the online module, they might hear it in a meeting, but I think sending out something where they can really read it and look through it and really absorb it, because they can hear it, but at the same time, they're also thinking, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this. But really putting out all the different scams, because they might not know about some of the different ones that we're seeing on this level a little bit more, because they're focused on the front line every day. But even just like we have controls in place in our support center, they have those questions they need to ask. They call them the non-wallet questions, the verification process of calling them back. So just making sure, like I said, the layers that need to be in place, but at the same time educating them to really know what's going on, especially in our era. We could tell them about other scams that really aren't happening, which is great education, but really focusing on what is currently happening now to our members and how can we protect our members from that. And then that's maybe giving them tips to educate the member themselves right at that front line as well. Yes. Like here are some tips to watch out for, and just passing that out more to members as well.
Yeah, and I think, sharing the knowledge, whether it's sharing within organizations, but sharing it with our retail staff. But we've also, I know we spoke on the radio show about, we've instituted a kind of a rewards so that as tellers or frontline staff identify fraud and they say, oh, wait a minute, this is a counterfeit, whether they refuse the item or whether they placed holds on it, and we identify that it truly is a counterfeit, we're rewarding, and we're, as part of that newsletter, to say, here's all the scams that we saw, here's the examples of the checks, here's the things that were anomalies in those checks that we can identify, but also here's the 12 people that saved us from losses, and I send a little handwritten note that says, thank you, Sally, for preventing a $2,500 loss, here's a gift card. And those right there have really motivated the staff to really stop and look and kind of help each other and congratulate each other. So it isn't all bad news. Let's give the good news of how much we've prevented, not just how much we've lost.
And that's a great idea too. It's always like reinforcing and rewarding for staff. I should say to staff that really have prevented the credit union from having a loss. I mean, that's a key thing.
And even to senior management, it makes them feel better when we're reporting we've lost this much in fraud, but oh, by the way, we prevented this much. And it's well over $500,000 in the last 12 months we've done. And I think people would see that, you recognize that if you actually start looking at it and reporting that, because it, again, give the good news, not just the bad news.
Exactly. All right, Shirley, Jeanette, Blake, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you too for being part of our webcast this morning. Again, what I'll do is this is being recorded, so I will have a link put into a story in the Daily Scene Scan so that if anyone does miss it, they could be able to watch it, see it again. If anyone has questions for any of us here on the panel, you'll be able to email me directly, and I'll have all that information in the scan article, and we'll pass it on, and we'll get back to anyone for whatever questions they might have. Again, thank you so much.